I cannot but feel that leaving it to the two states, either through international mediation or as a bilateral dispute, is not what I am interested in, and it doesn't matter to me because I don't think it's going to lead anywhere unless we put people at the center of politics, unless we understand what is it that they are fighting for, why it is they are fighting for, what they are trying to move away from, and why they want to opt out of a forced union with India. We will not get anywhere in terms of looking at the real solutions.
The Special Committee of Parliament on Kashmir represents the sentiments and commitments of the people of Pakistan to the just cause of Kashmiri people and their struggle for inalienable right of self-determination. It is a symbol of Pakistan's moral, diplomatic and political support to the Kashmiri struggle and serves as a constant reminder to our Kashmiri brethren that although the path they traverse is difficult and full of obstacles, they are not alone in their journey.
Every Pakistani politician, bureaucrat, civil society, our aim is very clear. This issue has to be resolved for stability in the entire region. I myself opted to be on this committee because my ancestors are also from Kashmir, and since childhood we've had these stories while having dinner, sitting together in the evenings. The joint family system brought new stories every day, what was happening there, relatives being martyred, relatives becoming refugees. So I have grown up with this in my family.
We all know this. It's one of the oldest agenda in the United Nations. Historically speaking, the unfinished agenda of the partition and the freedom of India and Pakistan. It has lingered on for more than 60 years now. The crux of the whole matter is, and how I can see, various distinguished speakers have said what they felt about it. The centrality of the whole issue is the right of self-determination and human rights.
That the situation in Kashmir is not frozen, and if at times it seems so, it will not stay frozen. The call needs to be renewed from every level, even one as modest as ours, for exploring all humane and reasonable avenues to deliver the men, women and children of Kashmir from a suffering as acute and unbearable as it is wholly unmerited.
Torture survivors we spoke with, non-militants and former militants who are now peace activists that I met testified to the sadism of the forces. Reportedly, a man hung upside down had petrol injected through his anus. Waterboarding, mutilation, rape of women, children, starvation, psychological torture. Brutalized, healed, to be brutalized again. An eagle tattoo on the arm of a man was reportedly identified by an army officer as a symbol of Azad Kashmir, and it was asked in a torture interrogation center that the eagle be razored out through an electric torch.
People in India have as good as aspirations of people in China or in Pakistan. The aspirations of the aspiration of people in Jammu and Kashmir is the liberty to decide the future of the state, the future, to exercise the right to self-determination that has accrued to us through many United Nations resolutions. As many as 17 resolutions have guaranteed this right to us.
Whatever seems original is international in its ramifications, in its fallout, and sometimes even in its genesis. That is true of any problem. But since this is how we are approaching the subject, let us first of all look at the regional dimension. The epicenter of the earthquake that began in 1947 and continues to remain as intense as it was in 1947 is
to go through all that history, all that pain, I must pay homage to all those people who basically the sacrifice, who to bringing up this issue with the generations, to move with the generations. And I think that I must remember the quotation of late Shaheed Zulfikar Ali Bhutto when he said that we will fight for the freedom of Kashmir for 1,000 years. That means that it was not to fight for 1,000 years, but it was the determination to keep on working on Kashmir, to keep on with the generations. And truly, I must pay homage all those writers, all those intellectuals, all those social and humanitarian, the organizations of humanitarian rights. They've been working with this Kashmir issue. I must pay homage all those who have sacrificed even their lives to bring up this issue up to this position.
He was a professor of Srinagar, economics professor from Srinagar University. He said, the worst moment of my life was that he was walking with his 8-year-old son in a Srinagar market. And they at random, the paramilitary troops there, they stop there, make a line and check people. So they made up a line in order to check people how they are in the Srinagar market. This professor was with his 8-year-old son. He said, I thought I've got a university card with me. He showed that card to the Sipahi there and asked him he can allow him to go because he's a professor, obviously he doesn't want to check him quickly. He said, the Sipahi took the card to someone there in a jeep, a military officer sitting in a jeep, and he came back and he ordered him to strip off your clothes. So in the main market, in front of his 8-year-old son, he was made to strip off his whole naked.
6 million people hostage. This situation was not a curfew, because a curfew has some limits and periods of relaxation. This enforced imprisonment of young, old, sick, and dying was more than a curfew. There were no ambulances on the road, and perhaps for the first time, no newspapers were published because of stringent restrictions on the movement of journalists and a complete shutdown of TV and cable channels. Such a situation is not new for Kashmir. What was new was the severity and intensity of this living prison.
Of political will. And B, there is hardly any change as a result of the CBMs or otherwise as far as the terrible plight of the innocent people of Kashmir is concerned. They continue to live under the shadow of the bayonets of over 700,000 Indian troops, constituting the heaviest concentration of forces anywhere in the world. They have to endure daily incidents of violation of their most fundamental human rights and mental and physical torture. Economically, Kashmir is today among the poorest parts of the world, despite being blessed with a hard-working population and
larger context, as well as social forces that are being mobilized and need to be mobilized to facilitate a just solution to Kashmir. I start with a series of questions. What are the various roles that diverse constituencies must play to facilitate political processes that undo militarization and subjugation in Indian-administered Kashmir? How can systemic structures that institutionalize violence, cultural annihilation, economic impoverishment, and political disempowerment be countered through nonviolent ethical resistance? What alliances are necessary to allow hope for overcoming cycles of oppression and breaking with histories of domination?